the French game should be a priority. Got a couple of fan views in on this one. Carsten said, about effing time. Hopefully they get France. Hopefully they get it and France can build up a hype around it. And David Hunter said, a positive move for International Rugby League. This current yo-yo of hosting between Australia and the UK is doing nothing for the game. I also heard USA in 2029 is a possibility. Maybe the world is waking up, as they say on the Chasing Ruse pod. I think people need to actually be aware that Rugby League World Cup games in France were played in the recent World Cups that have been hosted in the Northern Hemisphere. But this is a good news that the whole World Cup will be in France, so they can have the final stages as well in France, which can build up more momentum, you would think.
Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd certainly be in favour of it. I don't think we want to be talking about the USA yet. In terms of hosting it, because we thought they could have been hosting it in 2025, David. So let's let things bed in a bit more there for that. But France seems to be going quite well. You know, the Catalans have started the season well. Toulouse have started the season well. We've all kind of been entertained in the off season by the French games that have been streaming on the internet. So from the elite leagues competitions. So I'm all for this, and it would be a reason to go to France, because I wouldn't have another one to go to France if it wasn't for Rugby League.
Clearly.
Assuming by then in 3-4 years' time we're allowed to travel.
Yep.
What do you think?
I think it's really positive, yeah. And I think, let's talk about the 2029 World Cup, in the build-up to the 2025 one. Let's not rush it just yet.
Yeah.
In another 4 years, it might be a good time to talk about USA, but at the moment, let's not.
Yeah, because we could also talk about why doesn't New Zealand get to host a whole tournament itself?
Yep. International Rugby League chairman Troy Grant says it's likely the Ashes will be rescheduled for 2023. He says the 2020 Ashes series, which fell victim to the coronavirus pandemic, is unlikely to be rescheduled for 2022, and suggests New Zealand could instead provide the opposition for England next year. Grant said, traditionally, countries like a lighter year of content following a World Cup. The next Ashes series could take place in 2023, possibly to coincide with the next World Nines, and Grant says he is confident a 10-year calendar will finally be put in place as the IRL looks to get our act in order. Grant says the IRL is also exploring the possibility of private equity investment and is pushing for an alignment of the laws of the game between the NRL and the RFL. I don't know where they found this guy. He's actually talking sense, isn't he?
Well, it's certainly saying things that we want to happen in terms of getting the laws of the game aligned between the two major competitions. That's for certain, isn't it?
A 10-year calendar?
Yeah, well, a 10-year calendar's been on the agenda for the IRL for a number of years. I think the IRL being led by an Australian will be helpful in that regard, I would think, because they didn't want to listen, I felt like, to effectively the European board that was running things with Wood and people like that involved. So maybe this will help get what the IRL have been trying to put in place for some time actually pushed through. And if Grant can achieve that, then that's a real positive for sure.
Definitely, yeah.
I'm not excited about England playing a series against New Zealand. I've got to say, I would almost prefer an away series in 2022.
Yeah.
And not have to think about going and watching England New Zealand in the cold of November. What will feel like again and again and again. But we'll see. I'm sure by the time it comes around, I'll have an appetite for it.
Yeah, you say you don't want to, but it's a year and a half away, isn't it?
That's true. And finally, Toronto Wolfpack and Ottawa Aces will take part in a new North American Professional Rugby League competition that has been launched this week. The NARL will be a 14-team competition that will play its first round of games on the weekend of June the 19th in Brooklyn and June the 20th in Las Vegas. Teams from across the USA and Canada will compete in 3 conferences: the East Coast Conference, the West Coast Conference, and the Canada Cup. The Atlanta Rhinos, Boston 13s, Brooklyn Kings, Cleveland Rugby League, New York Rugby League, and Washington Cavalry will be in the East Coast Conference. So a few teams that we know the names of there, and a few speculative teams for the future. In the West Coast Conference will be the Austin Armadillos, the Las Vegas Blackjacks, the Phoenix Venom, the Portland Loggers, who, I'm getting on board with the Loggers. I just think there's too much entertainment to be had out of that name. The San Diego Swell and the San Francisco Rush. Due to COVID regulations, a Canada Cup will be played between Toronto and Ottawa before the teams enter the East Coast Conference in 2022. All games will be broadcast on NARL's exclusive online streaming partner, SportsFlick. Due to COVID regulations in 2021, all games will be played in a single venue that will see all teams in their respective conference play in one stadium on one day with no fans to keep everyone safe. Lots of fan interaction on this one, Sarah. So shall we rotate through? Do you want to give the first one and then I'll do the next and so on and so forth?
Yep, so Carsten said, well, the North America trip is back on the agenda. Good for some die-hard fans over there. I'm careful about the rest, but I'm a member of New York City and Ottawa, so I'm in already.
Joshua's granddad said, the correct way to establish the sport in North America will imagine a few journeymen from here and Oz will find a home there, but hopefully they will cap the number of imports and allow their own players to develop.
Yep. At BritBronco37 said, this is great news. It's a shame all the USA RL teams are not involved. Hopefully COVID will not slow things down too much. This is the way forward for Rugby League over here.
Jim Powers at Bereft of the Dial said, as an American fan of the game, yes, it's great someone is starting what appears to be a pro league. I am wondering now what happens with the USARL teams that have been left out, whether the players in this will be eligible for the national team. That hadn't even been sorted out at the last general meeting regarding the California RL players, Jim says. And what, if any, relationship will there be between this league and the California RL and the Canadian Cooperative Rugby League? I'm also very curious about the broadcast information, because if the only option is a $10 a month on SportsFlick, a site totally unknown in America, when it only costs $6 a month for ESPN Plus with its upwards of 40 different sports leagues offerings, that's not going to be good. They really need to be on accessible TV somewhere here. Beyond that, I'm curious about where are all these players coming from, given that our existing 12 USARL teams have had to loan each other players in the past, so 14 teams, 11 from scratch. Who are these guys? Overall, I'm excited, but yeah, I've got questions.
And David Hunter said, I thought this was suspicious in the timing, being an Aussie that saw it on the morning of the 1st of April. I'm sceptical but hurtful. I wonder if some League One or lower tier Aussies will go over to playing this. Whatever happens, they need to stick with this and let it grow.
Tom Andrews said, how it should have been from the start. Hopefully we support it, playing friendlies over there, not just us, the NRL too. Maybe the World Club Challenge could be expanded to include them somehow too. And we did get a late one in as well from our old friend Rajun Tande at Rugby League Raj. He said, hopeful but not fully convinced that it'll happen. There's a lot of new clubs mentioned, and in some in areas where there are more established competition. I'd feel more confident about the new comp if there had been support expressed by the USARL and California RL governing bodies. There's so many open questions, but if it gets off the ground, I'll be at a San Fran Rush game, home games, when the COVID crisis ends. Yeah, I think, guys like Jim and Raj have kind of covered it pretty good from the American perspective, or people living in America perspective. Raj, I know you're a good Batley boy, so it's pretty rounded views there, isn't it?
Yeah, I think.
I
what's your thoughts?
I'm in the excited but sort of questions kind of group as well. I would say I think I totally get that this is how it should always have been done argument. I do wonder that if it wasn't for the Toronto Wolfpack experiment, journey, whatever you might call it, whether there would have then been the appetite for this to happen. I also wonder if there hadn't have been the COVID situation and the impacts that has had on this, desire of these North American clubs to enter the European League, whether this would have happened too. And I think the answer to both those questions might be no. So, I think what we should maybe look at this at is, rather than the way it should always have been done, kind of look at it as if this does get off the ground and does lead to something, then this is the true lasting legacy of the Toronto experience. And if that is the case, then that's fantastic. And it was probably worth all of David Argyle's millions, however much he spent or not, to get to this. I do think now the names involved and you see involved are the dreamers and the ideas men. Whether they have the substance to make it fully work is a concern, but the idea of something that covers the whole continent of North America is fantastic and very exciting.
Yep, I totally agree. I think I'm with the who was that last review from? The one that you had that I didn't.
Raj.
Yeah, I'm with him. San Francisco Rush here.
Yeah, and I do think that that West Coast group of the West Coast Conference is the interesting one, because they're all new teams to Rugby League. A few of them are rugby union teams that are getting a Rugby League team in their off-season, so, there's going to be some adjustment there. But to be honest, that conference is what should have been set up when the American All-Stars landed back in the country after their tour of Australia in the 1950s. So, it's 70 years late or whatever, but it's still great to see that happening. Hopefully, like everyone says, they do work with the existing grassroots there. This is going to be a pro league, or really semi-pro for the first period of it, of course, because they're talking about a salary cap of £300,000. Or dollars. That's not an elite professional competition salary level. So, we'll see how it grows, but it's only gonna succeed if it feeds from and back into the grassroots, like the plans we've seen with the Canadian Cooperative League that we talked about a few weeks ago. Me and Tim did. That's got a plan within its constitution almost to feed back into the sport with the money that they potentially might make in the future. So, I'm not saying this needs to do that from a financial point of view necessarily. There's not a lot of money to go around, but it needs to have a good link with it. It seems to have the support of the Canadian Rugby League, but I've not heard anything from the American side of it. I've not even seen any press with an American website on it. It's been, I've seen Canadian news sources talk about it or be retweeted and that sort of stuff. Not seen anything from the USA side. I've not seen any sort of talk or explanation around maybe why some established teams like, why there's no team in Philadelphia, why there's no team in Florida. That sort of stuff hasn't been explained. So yeah. But I don't want to be tearing it apart when it's just starting. I want to be enthusiastic, and I want to hopefully see support for this grow, and it be more than just shirts go on sale but no games get played, which so let's get behind it and hope it succeeds. And like I say, I feel like finally in sport I'm going to back an underdog, and I'm going to be behind the Portland Loggers. Well, it's probably a dangerous position to be in, but we'll see.
Yep.
Great stuff. Thanks everyone for their views on the news this week. Also, shout out, of course, to our sources